All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Ebony Ryan, Senior Marketing Communications Manager here at Cardinal Path. I definitely want to start by saying welcome to the first of our free training series, Google Analytics 101, Fundamentals of Google Analytics. Before we get started, I just have a couple of housekeeping items to cover. First, this session is being recorded. A link to the recording, along with any additional resources that we talk about, will be sent to you after today's event. We've allowed time for questions, so please send them in to us as you think of them. You can just use your go-to panel to submit your question. There may be opportunities for me to interrupt Scott to ask relevant questions, but we will likely address the bulk of the questions towards the end of the training. And if we don't have time to answer your question live, we will be sure to follow up with you to answer you directly via email. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Scott.
That's great. Thanks very much, Ebony. Well, just want to say again, welcome to everyone. This is Google Analytics 101. This is a three-part series to focus on providing a broad introduction to Google Analytics. And today is an introductory session focused on core concepts and some of the first principles around digital measurement and using Google Analytics to better understand consumer behavior online. And really, it's about understanding what your customers are doing, what preferences they're exhibiting for marketing campaigns, as well as website content consumption, and also, of course, conversions, which is pretty important. Okay, so a quick introduction to Cardinal Path. Cardinal Path is really focused on analytics, marketing optimization, and we're a group of about 200 analysts, statisticians, data science folks. We're partnered with Google, so we get a lot of the insider knowledge related to Google's product paths. The other thing that Cardinal Path is famous for is training. So we've trained over 100,000 people, and we bring this training to you today as well. There's really no time like the present to help the community to be more effective in this changing environment. I think what we're witnessing now is one of the greatest shifts in human behavior in over 100 years. And Cardinal Path is really focused on helping our customers and the digital marketing community to navigate this change and develop skills that are increasingly important as services and consumer interaction go online through the use of computers and smartphones. And for those of you who are working from home, this is also a great time to do some additional skill development. Quick introduction to myself. My name is Scott Shannon. I'm based in Ottawa in Canada. There's a link to the LinkedIn profile just down below there on the left. And I have lots of experience implementing advanced analytics across the Fortune 500 companies, B2B, as well as B2C, government, as well as NGOs. And I got started on my journey in digital analytics by doing a commerce degree with a concentration in management information systems at the University of Calgary. Personal note, my hobbies include skiing, canoeing, coffee, jazz, all while being a dad. I have two boys, 12 and 10. Okay, and just wanted to say once again, welcome to everyone attending from wherever you are in the world. And we have a pretty large number of folks attending today. So welcome everyone from Asia, North America, Europe, Africa, wherever you happen to be today, welcome. Okay, quick overview of Google Analytics 101. Today, we're going to be focusing on part one, which is the fundamentals of Google Analytics, okay? Part two is going to focus more on the 4 pillars of reporting. And part three is going to focus in on some of the custom reporting and dashboarding that you can do within Google Analytics. Okay, so today, we're really focused on the fundamentals. We don't expect you to have any prior knowledge of Google Analytics. We're going to do the basic introduction. All right. And the agenda we have crafted for you today, number one, an introduction to digital analytics. What is it? We'll talk about identifying goals, and this is your business goals and how they might manifest inside of Google Analytics. We'll talk a bit about how Google Analytics actually works. And most importantly, we'll focus on how you can get the information that's going to matter most to your business or the business of the business that you serve. Finally, we'll have a quick navigation of the Google Analytics interface itself, and that will give you kind of a foundational orientation. And we do have a little bit of homework at the end. We'll give you a few things that you can do on your own before next week's part 2 presentation. Okay, first off, quick introduction to digital analytics. Increasingly, particularly with a pandemic, if digital was important in the past, it's even more important today. And a quick for example, as with grocery shopping, historically we went to the store to browse, and now we see a big movement towards digital. So curbside, grocery pickup, delivery services, etc. This is growing really quickly. And what's really important in this environment as more and more commerce goes digital is building up knowledge about your customers and developing what we call digital customer profiles so that we can learn more about individual customers, groups of customers, and the entire customer base that our business serves. All right, so this is some Google mobility data focused on Canada, where I'm located. And we can see a giant shift in the way that mobile phones are in proximity to grocery stores and pharmacies just in the past couple weeks. Okay, so this is that giant shift that I was talking about. And we can see the first spike is when people might have been stocking up on groceries, and then we see a gradual drop off to roughly negative 35% of the expected baseline of visitation to those types of establishments. So we can use data like this to figure out how to structure our business to meet the needs of customers. And that's really the key concept. And just as grocery stores are seeing a big change in customer behavior, they're probably also seeing a big swing in the opposite direction towards online orders. All right. So in today's experience, just about all of us have a cell phone, maybe we have a tablet, maybe we have a laptop. We've got lots of different devices to access the internet and to peruse information. The bottom line is today's customer journey is fragmented. As people do research, come online to try to understand what your business is, it's increasingly fragmented and complex in the ways that people might hear about you and potentially pursue a product or a service that your organization offers. So for example, if you're going to buy a new cell phone, how would you approach that? You might talk to friends, use social media, do a little bit of research online, perhaps check out some reviews, and maybe visit some of the sites like Apple's site for an iPhone, the Samsung site, HTC, or a Google Pixel website to look for special offers, for example. And you'll do tons of internet research over several days in order to determine what your options are, what the trade-offs are between products, and to help you otherwise narrow down your search. Finally, you'll select a product. And this is the same type of approach that almost all consumers in B2C and B2C follow, right? So for any product or service, there will be this type of behavior where people are collecting information in order to help inform their decision. And more, we're using cell phones in order to search for that information. This is even more complex if you just think about the number of devices that each consumer may have on average and the speed at which people might get a new cell phone, maybe every 2 years or 3 years. Every time there's a new device, then it adds a little bit more fragmentation into this universe called the customer journey. Okay, so Google Analytics is pretty widespread. The Google Analytics JavaScript file is the most downloaded JavaScript file in the entire world by a long shot, by a factor of 10, I think, or more. So it's really big. In this chart, we're looking at the top 1,000 internet retailers. On the left, we see Google Analytics in blue and Adobe Analytics in orange. And we see that it's a little bit like a Pepsi-Coke scenario here, where they have roughly equivalent market share. And this is partly due to the fact that Adobe Analytics, similar to Google Analytics, was actually the first mover, and Omniture was the first kind of enterprise class analytics solution. And on the right-hand side, what we see is Adobe Analytics has less usage in the top 1,000 internet retailers, and Google Analytics is kind of dominating that specific market. And this pattern extends to small and medium-sized enterprise as well, where Google Analytics is really the current standard in terms of analytics for small and medium-sized enterprise, partly because of their freemium model. And the key advantage with Google Analytics is the direct integration with Google's media platforms, the paid media platforms like Google Ads and DV360. And basically what this integration allows us to do is pull together all of our paid advertising information with all of our on-site behavior information that we'd find inside Google Analytics to get one integrated data set. So that's one of the key value adds of Google Analytics. All right, so web analytics, we'll start with the definition because this really helps us to be more focused. Web analytics is the measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting of internet data for the purpose of understanding and optimizing. So the important part is highlighted in the bottom phrase, understanding and optimizing, okay? So what this means is, as we collect information on how people are perusing our website, using our web apps, finding us in the first place, as well as which campaigns, digital marketing campaigns or offline campaigns are actually driving users to our website for conversion purposes, for example, or for additional brand exposure, content consumption, engagement, etc. The key thing is we want to understand the consumer behavior, and we want to take those insights about what consumers are doing in order to optimize our website, our media campaigns, and we may go so far as to optimize our business and modify the way that we're actually delivering value to customers. More and more, we're using the term digital analytics, which is different than web analytics, because nowadays we're integrating the analytics data set, the traditional web analytics data set, with CRM information, marketing automation products as well. So when we say digital analytics, that will also encompass not just the user behavior on the website, it'll also encompass the backend databases that our businesses may have, such as a customer relationship management solution. Okay, so really important concept, and the most important thing is before you get started with Google Analytics, you really need to focus, okay? And as marketers and business owners, we know that every day there's 1,000 things that we could be working on. So prioritization is really key. And analytics is not different than this. So the key and critical concept, that's probably the most important thing I'll say today, is that your business goals and your business objectives should drive the use of technology and define how that technology is going to be used in pursuit of your business objectives, okay? Google Analytics is a very configurable tool, and it can be customized around your business. So think about your website. Think about what the purpose of your website is. Really, when we talk about, why do we have a website in the first place? What are we in the business of doing? You may have a specific goal of lead generation, selling things online like e-commerce, finding talent, potentially if you're a career site. Maybe it's to get someone to click on a telephone number, pick up the phone and call you. Or in the case of Dell or an airline, you might be focused on customer support, so people can self-service, help themselves to different kinds of information, and solve their own problems in order to reduce your own cost structure. So the key questions are, what are users trying to do on your site? And what do you hope customers will do on your site? So what we're going to do first is we're going to develop what are called KPIs, or key performance indicators, okay? And in this example, we see bounce rate, time on site, conversions, social sharing, page views. These are all potential measures of what's happening on our website and how users are interacting with us. If we see a large group of users coming in from one of our campaigns, and we see it has a very high bounce rate, i.e. 80% of people are looking at one page and then leaving the site, we know that we haven't done the proper targeting in order to get the right audience onto our website. So bounce rate is like the very first indicator of how are we doing in terms of attracting the right prospects and customers to our site. Some other measures that may be useful in terms of KPIs might be the number of new leads that you're generating, a count of new customers who are actually spending money with you, a count of transactions, or potentially total revenue that a customer is spending. You might be looking at the lifetime value of customer spend. And another important concept, of course, is talking about profit versus just revenue, okay? Because ultimately, we want to be able to get a clear idea about who our customers are, which ones are most profitable to serve, and what kind of a benefit our campaigns are driving in terms of the bottom line. Okay, so when Cardinal Path develops measurement guides for clients, the first thing that we do is we learn about how the business runs, what's important to the business. And an important concept, of course, along the customer journey is this initial awareness that customers might have as they start perusing our site and learning about us, or seeing ads or content marketing out there on the internet that might drive them back to our site, as well as any social advertising, be it organic or paid. And in this example, for that initial awareness, we might be focused on metrics like the number of sessions, the number of ad impressions that users see out on the internet, as well as something like the cost per click, so that we can optimize media in order to be as efficient as possible. When we move to the engagement phase, we can use other measures such as number of page views, downloads of PDFs or white papers potentially, number of video watches, people who are completing entire videos, as well as things like bounce rate. Okay, these are just some examples. A little further down the customer journey is the conversion phase. And I like to break the conversion phase up into two pieces. The first being micro conversions, which are the small but important and beneficial things that users may do on the website, such as watching a video, providing an email address, expressing interest in a specific product, for example. And we also have a few other examples, which may even include things like PDF downloads. So those are micro conversions, okay? They're important, and they may help you determine how successful is that awareness campaign that you're building, right? But ultimately, the really important concept is to focus on another type of conversion, which we'll call a macro conversion, right? So anything that directly affects your revenue or profitability as an organization, we'd call a macro conversion, okay? In this case, purchases, maybe people signing up for a product, or maybe it's trying a free trial, for example. Okay, and finally, it's not enough to just satisfy a customer one time in one day. Ultimately, what we want to do is develop a longer-term relationship with customers. So we do want repeat business, very important. So maybe some of the indicators we can look at in terms of that retention capability along the customer journey is our repeat users, newsletter click-through rate, or our retargeting click-through rate. And of course, if you do email marketing, then you may have a newsletter, for example. We want to know, are we putting out the right content that makes people say, curious about that? They click in, they come to the site, we're demonstrating that we're providing value, right? And retargeting works a similar way, but the advantage if you're using Google Analytics is that you can actually create audiences within all of the activity that's occurring on your website, and looking at the user behavior and segmentation in order to retarget that specific group of users, maybe to bring them back to the site to complete an order purchase, for example. And I'm sure many of you have experienced that. And we also have the ability with Google's platform to go a little bit wider and do something called similar audience retargeting, right? And really what that means is that Google is looking at the smaller group of users who do this thing that's important for some reason. And they're saying, okay, based on that sample of users, here's a whole bunch of other users that Google is aware about that are similar in their behavior or their interactions online. Okay, and finally, in this age of social media, it is really important to allow the customers out there to report good experiences and to essentially operate as part of the sales force of our organization, right? And customers may achieve this customer advocacy either by leaving reviews on our site, sharing, maybe it's a product detail page, or a, hey, look what I just purchased, as well as forwarding email and things like that, okay? So customers are critical now in terms of being able to spread the good word and good experience of the organization, right? If you are able to delight the customer and actually make them strong advocates for your brand. All right, so we're gonna get a little more tactical here. This is a tactical approach to laying out key performance indicators. So first off, we'd start with our business objective, whatever it is. In this example, we'll say it's to acquire new customers, very common. Next is to set a target next to that. So let's say, for example, we're looking at, we're targeting a 15% increase in attendance or new customers in a 1-year period, okay? For each one of these targets, we might have certain initiatives we undertake to achieve that target that rolls up to that business objective. So in this example, we have a Google Ads campaign, and we also have a social media campaign, okay? For each one of those initiatives, we will have some KPIs or key performance indicators. So for the Google Ads, we might be looking at a conversion rate for each of the campaigns we run. We might also have a conversion value by session, which basically means if we're going to send 100 users through on a campaign and bring them back to the website, how much revenue are we actually creating, or better yet, profit are we creating on a per session basis, okay, as people are coming in from that campaign. It helps us to understand the overall impact, efficiency, targeting efficiency as well, and the process and the funnel that users go through on our website to determine kind of the effectiveness of that user experience and driving outcomes. Down below, we see social campaigns. We may have more of an upper funnel awareness campaign in social, where we're driving people to the website in order to consume content and learn, and potentially when they're on our website, they may even like certain things in Facebook, so that we have this virtuous cycle where, you know, one visitor from Facebook may like it and bring in, you know, 100 of their friends potentially back to this one particular thing. Okay, so this is an example of, number one, setting your business objective, and you'll have several of these or many of these in your organization. Being clear in terms of establishing a target, and then defining what initiatives should be rolling up to each of these targets that you create and each business objective. And then finally, deciding what the discrete measures of success are going to be, okay? So you're welcome to use this example, but you'll probably have several more depending on your business and your business objectives. Also important to remember that your business objectives will change over time. So this is something that, you know, you'll do once to kind of figure out what are the KPIs, what are our most important business objectives, maybe for the quarter or for the year. And then over time, you'll learn about your customers. Your business will continuously improve and change potentially over time. And you can revisit these business objectives over time to see, are they still relevant, say in the following year. Okay, so let's talk a bit about Google Analytics and how it works. So it's a little bit technical, but a requirement for Google Analytics to work, to measure your website customer interactions, is cookies on the left and JavaScript on the right. So your browsers of your customers will need to allow cookies and run JavaScript in order for tracking to work successfully in Google Analytics. On the left-hand side, when we talk about these cookies, we're talking about something called first-party cookies. And what this means is only the website that's actually hosting this Google Analytics can set these cookies, okay, for customers who are coming to that site. And that just is a little bit different than the third-party cookies, which can track users across the internet, right? So the evil spy cookies, some people call them, these are different than that, and Google Analytics works on first-party cookies, okay? And it's important to note that websites are designed to use first-party cookies in order to function. So first-party cookies will be with us for a long time to come. Okay, and let's talk big picture. So when a visitor comes to your website, the first thing that will happen in the device that they're using, either a cell phone or say a laptop, is there'll be a request for an HTML page, right, at a certain address on the internet. A web server out there on the internet that hosts the website will send back the page into the user's browser and onto their machine. At this point, Google Analytics will set a cookie and we'll run some JavaScript. And the instructions are basically to package up some information by calling a pixel and send that information off to the Google Analytics servers. Okay. Now, Google Analytics operates in two phases. The first is the data collection phase, which we see here, and then the data processing and rendering phase, which is the second part, which is shown over here. And on the far right-hand side, this is the user interface for Google Analytics. So for the thousands of users who are coming to your website, each and every page that they view, or a button that they click, or video that they watch, will send a discrete package of data into Google Analytics. And remember, this Google Analytics system is load balanced across the world on Google's infrastructure. So this will work anywhere in the world. And once that data is processed, it'll show up in your reports and you'll be able to count number of page views, number of users, what kinds of interactions, and how many goal conversions are occurring. When you set up Google Analytics for the first time, you'll be able to create at least one account. You may have several accounts. And in this example, we have the My Company account, and then we have the My Personal Website account, okay? Both tied to the same either Gmail address or Google account. Underneath My Company, we see we have two properties, website and the company app, which historically have always been kept separate, but Google Analytics has a new version called App and Web, which allows you to get a single view of customers across both their app interactions and their website interactions and have everything in one data set, okay? It's a new feature. And if your users are able to log in on your website and your app, then that's a capability that you should consider using to get a single view of your users. This is something that reduces the fragmentation and complexity in terms of understanding consumer behavior. So this property level really defines the data silos that will occur inside Google Analytics. Underneath website, we have an example of 3 different profiles. And really, we're talking about a subset of data. So at the property level, we have our data silo that contains all of the information that's been collected. And these views may be a little bit different. So main reporting might, for example, exclude your internal company traffic, right? So you can focus on your customers, not what the folks nearby inside the office are actually doing. You may also have a view that's a testing view so that you can test changes that you want to make there in terms of configuration before you roll them out to production in the main reporting view. And finally, you may have a raw data view, which is essentially all data, no filtration, everything that's possible is there. The Google Analytics 360, which is the paid version of Google Analytics, has some additional functionality here for large enterprise that allows you to roll up many different websites all into a single view of customers. So if you have 8 different company websites, then you're able to get a single view of customers across all 8 of those websites, for example. Okay, so as we go through the Google Analytics setup process, we'll actually get a little snippet of code here. And on the left-hand side with the red arrow, you'll see a little chunk of JavaScript. That's really all you need on each and every one of your web pages in order to track users using Google Analytics. Okay, we'll call that vanilla tracking. Okay, no special customizations, just basic tracking. And there are really 4 different ways of deploying Google Analytics to measure your website. Number 1 is the simple tag. Number 2 might be a content management system plugin. Okay, so if you're using WordPress or some other content management system, there may be a plugin that helps you install Google Analytics across the entire site. The third method for installing Google Analytics on your website is Google Tag Manager, the icon shown on the right-hand side. This is the way that most large enterprises are actually installing Google Analytics today, because it allows you to be very agile and customize the tracking and data collection in a very kind of granular and tailored way. And I should also mention there are other tag manager systems like Tealium or Adobe Dynamic Tag Manager. And these systems work in a very similar way to Google Tag Manager, but they may not have as tight an integration, and it may be a little more complex to operate some of the other tag managers, but it really depends on the skill set inside your organization. But definitely Google Analytics, in the same way that it is universally accessible and relatively simple, Google Tag Manager is moving in just the same direction. Okay, so once you're inside of Google Analytics and you've installed it and you're starting to collect data and you see it in the interface, there are two types of information that you'll see there. One is on the left-hand side, the various dimensions, right? So it could be the page, a campaign name, a landing page, what type of device the user is using, maybe even what city or state the user is coming from when they visit your website. On the right-hand side, any count, a number, or a percentage that you see in Google Analytics can just be referred to as a metric. And the key metric I'll point out here on the right-hand side is the conversion rate. So out of all the people who end up coming to your website, what percentage of those actually do this thing that you want them to do, right? Whatever the purpose of your website is. So when people view a page or click on a button or watch a video, for example, we're going to send a little package of information from the user's browser into Google Analytics, and it will land in our Google Analytics account, okay? And we have a few different examples here. There's also e-commerce tracking, which is important. So this hit level data is really just a discrete package of data of the kind of the finest granularity that you can have in terms of how Google Analytics collects data. The next level up is an aggregation of all of these single packages and hits of information, and it's called a session, right? So people who come to your website and interact with it for a certain period of time, anything that happens within a 30-minute window is all grouped together, and we call it a session. This is a useful concept because essentially what we're doing is we're saying if someone comes in from a certain campaign we have, some digital advertising we're doing, they come to the website, they may do 100 different things on the website, but we really want to know, did they convert? Did they give us their email address? Or did they spend just the right amount of time on the site to show that they were engaged? Or did they make a purchase, for example, okay? So by grouping in a session, we can actually put together that initial campaign data, where the person came from, what the keyword was that they had typed in, for example, and then what they ended up doing on our website. And that is really good intelligence to get inside the mind of your consumers and make sure that you're providing campaigns, creative that makes sense, and that are actually going to attract the right users. And your website, of course, will do the job of converting those users. All right, and the next level of aggregation is the user level. And when someone comes back to your website, day after day, for example, they'll all have the same identifier. We call it the client ID, okay, which is really that first-party cookie that we alluded to earlier. If a person comes to your website on 3 different devices, then by default in Google Analytics, we'd say there are 3 distinct users, okay? But if that user logs in on your site, we're able to actually group all of that information together and understand that that one person is the same user across all 3 devices. Okay, so a quick example. So at the top, we see we have one user to our website who visits our site on, say, 3 different days and has 1 session per day, all on the same computer. Okay, so that's going to work out to be 3 different sessions and 1 user. Down below, we have another visitor to our website who visits the site across a few different weeks, let's say, and we see 3 sessions occur on 1 computer, a desktop computer, and 1 session occurs on a tablet. It's the same user, but inside Google Analytics, we'll actually see 4 sessions and 2 different users in this case. Okay, so let's talk a bit about how you can get the information that matters most. And for all of you who've been into Google Analytics, you'll know there are tons of reports, tons of dimensions, tons of metrics, and it can be overwhelming almost, unless you have an approach to kind of focus in on what's going to matter most. So when we do KPI discovery, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to close our Google Analytics. We're not going into analytics to figure out what's valuable there. Quite the opposite. We're going to close Google Analytics and we're going to think about our business, our customers, and how users and customers are interacting with all of our digital, okay? Second thing you're going to do is invite your marketing team to a room or online virtually, for example, and we'll do some brainstorming, either with sticky notes or an online workbook, for example, where you can collaborate. And the things that you want to really focus in on are discussing your immediate business goals, discussing customer preferences and needs, discussing the user's online experience with your content, and what other questions about your customers do you really need an answer for in order to serve them better? This will allow you to answer that final question. So what are the KPIs, the key performance indicators, and the reports that you'll need to focus in on? Once you've kind of gone through this process a few times and had some good discussion, then you'll be able to finalize your current KPIs. And if you recall, this type of an approach will help you to refine that. So name all your business objectives first, establish a target to improve upon those, set your initiatives that will help you achieve those targets, and finally, define those discrete and granular KPIs that are going to help you measure these outcomes. You'll want to group everything into what's called a KPI inventory, right? This way, everyone's on the same page about what's really important and what should be measured in terms of consumer interaction on your website. So in this example, there are a few variations, but you can see business objectives, target, initiatives, KPIs. We may also have one additional column, which is what part of the user journey is this, right? Is it the awareness level, the engagement? Is it a micro conversion, a macro conversion? Or is it retention, or is it advocacy? So you may just add a drop-down, for example, to help make sure that you have coverage across the entire user journey and make sure that you have relevant and meaningful KPIs across the entire journey. The other thing that I often see is a desire to assign each of these KPIs to a specific internal business audience, okay? So the marketing department may have different needs than the IT department, for example. So you can add that in if you like. You can choose to drop the target if you like here as well, if that's not useful to you. And note that at the end of this session, we'll be sending out a KPI workbook to help you get started with your KPIs. All right, so let's get into navigating Google Analytics.
Hey, Scott.
Yes?
Can I interrupt you for a few questions?
Of course.
Okay, awesome. So you spoke about what is required for tracking in Google Analytics, and we had a question come in that asked, what is the difference between a pixel and a cookie?
Okay, great. Yeah, so a cookie is basically just a unique identifier that will actually live inside the user's browser, right? So it's that unique identifier. So every time that browser comes back to a specific website, there'd be a check. Google Analytics would say, is there a cookie? And if so, is it the same cookie as before? And we can increment a count of visits, okay? Each time Google Analytics runs, it will actually call a file, we'll call it a pixel, from Google's servers. And that's basically how this information about the user visiting a certain page is going to be transferred into Google Analytics, okay? Part of the data that goes into Google Analytics is going to be that cookie identifier for that particular browser. I hope that clarifies.
Yeah, I think that was actually a great response there. I have another question that says, does Google Analytics differentiate users within the company versus users outside the company?
Yeah, it's a great point. So by default, if you don't do any modifications to Google Analytics wouldn't know if it's an internal user or an external user. We might have something like the geographical location of the user, what city are they coming from? You might be able to see, okay, we've got 20% of all of our users coming to us from the same city that we're in. We know we don't have a lot of customers in our city, so this must be mostly internal traffic. But what we usually work through with a lot of our clients is identifying what the IP addresses are for the organization and adding in some filters to help block data from our internal users, okay? We don't want that data going into our production view. However, there's always the problem that users will be using a cell phone that is not on a company network, might be coming from a different IP address, or they might be working from home, which makes it a little bit harder to separate out the internal traffic versus the general public and potential prospects. One other method that can be used by organizations, especially in this time where we have so many people working from home, is to actually create a page somewhere on your website that only your internal employees will visit, okay? So it's a hidden URL, it's not indexed publicly. You might put it up for a day and then take it down after that. And you can use that page that only your internal staff are going to see to set an additional cookie that has the value of, yes, this is internal staff, okay? And once that cookie is present, then some of that customization you can do in Google Analytics can help you separate out that traffic by marking all of that data that's coming into analytics and allowing you to filter it out of some of your production views, for example, in Google Analytics. So I hope that answers the question. Let us know if you want a little bit more detail on what that looks like, that process, because I think today especially, it's very important.
Totally. Thanks, Scott. We have a number of questions, but I'm going to just let you keep on going and we'll get as many as we can at the end.
Okay, terrific. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about navigating Google Analytics. So the very first thing, if you have never used Google Analytics before, let's say you have a brand new website, or maybe it's a Shopify site, and you want to get Google Analytics on the site, first thing that you'll actually do is you'll visit the Welcome to Google Analytics page. You'll determine what type of tracking do you want to do. Is it purely a website tracking? Is it an app that you want to track? Or is it both? And this is that new feature I was mentioning called App and Web, where you can get a single view of your users across both their app interactions and the website interactions, okay? And really what's required there is for users to log in either on the website and in the app, and if they do that, then you'd be able to use that login identifier in order to join those data sets. So decide on what kind of Google Analytics you want to run. And next, you'll populate a little bit of data. You'll fill out some basic information about your website URL, optional information like industry, location and time zone, etc. Pretty straightforward. And then finally, once Google Analytics is activated, you can actually visit the Google Analytics interface, and for your login ID, you'll see the various Google Analytics accounts that you have access to. If you're just starting out, you'll only have one, which makes it pretty easy. And through the administration panel, you can actually go in and take a look at your tracking code. So remember that you can start Google Analytics and have it all up and running for data collection, but not put your tracking code on the website until you're actually ready to start collecting that data. So you'll have essentially an empty Google Analytics instance, and once you deploy your tracking code across all of your web pages, then that's when you'll start actually collecting the data in the Google Analytics interface. And again, this is what the script looks like, and we talked through the 4 main ways of kind of deploying Google Analytics, where if you have access to a developer and some technically savvy folks, sometimes they can just deploy the tag for you. Whoever maintains your website, for example, or you can instruct them to install Google Analytics using Google Tag Manager, or maybe a WordPress plugin that allows for Tag Manager to be installed across the site instantaneously. That's probably the easiest way to get tracking to go live. One other thing I'll mention, once you've installed your Google Analytics tracking code across all of your pages, and maybe you start to see data collecting inside the interface, but maybe you're a little bit worried. You say, well, I'm not really sure if Google Analytics is deployed properly on all my web pages, or maybe there's a certain part of the website where things aren't installed properly. You can use one of these 3 tools, amongst others, in order to validate that, yes, when I view one of my pages using my browser, I do see a package of data being sent to Google Analytics. And you can double check that the right information is being sent. This is particularly valuable when you customize the type of information that you're sending into Google Analytics. So for most users on the top left, this Tag Assistant by Google is just something that will exist in your Chrome web browser. It's just an extension. And I tend to recommend this because it's really easy to use. Essentially, as you visit web pages, you'll have a little blue tag on the top right. And if that tag turns yellow or red, then you know you have an issue that you may need to resolve in terms of data collection, either in Google Ads or Google Analytics. These two other Chrome extensions on the right, Observe Point Tag Debugger and WASP Inspector, maybe a little bit more for advanced users, but you can check them out. And I'd probably just recommend that most novice users on the call today install Tag Assistant and get a little bit familiar with it, and even visit some of your favorite websites to see what kind of Google Analytics tracking do they have running on their website. For all the users out there, and for all the folks on the call today who don't have any Google Analytics set up, but you want to get into the interface, see how reports work, and get a real feel for Google Analytics, there is a demo account that Google provides that is fully populated with data from the Google Store. So if you just do a quick search for a Google demo account or a Google Analytics demo account, it'll bring you to this page, and on the bottom left, you can access the demo account. And that is going to have all of the data and the e-commerce data, all of the channel data and campaign data, as well as which pages are being viewed, which products are being purchased across, on the right-hand side, this website called the Google Merchandise Store. Okay. And I'm just going to open up a browser here and just show you a little bit of this so you get a good idea about how it works. All right, so first off, here is the Google Merchandise Store. And let's say I want to see the store for the United States. All right, great. So this is where we can find different hats, apparel. Let's say I'm interested in Google branded products for kids. Okay, so I can figure out which products I'm interested in. And it's important to look just on the top right-hand side here. I see I have WASP installed and I see some tracking is happening, right? I see what kind of tracking is occurring. And I also have Google Tag Inspector here, right? And it's going to tell me, you know, what's happening there. And it has the option to actually record my session. So as I click through the website, select certain products and check out, I can actually go back in time and see all of those individual hits collect for my session, okay? All right, and just a quick reminder, this is what the Google demo account webpage looks like. You can see the URL just up here, just to make sure you're in the right place. This is the link. And this is what the initial welcome screen will look like. So our setup is pretty straightforward. We can just go through this process in order to get our tracking code. And I won't go into too much detail on that right now, but I will just open up one additional browser to show what the Google Analytics data set looks like. So once you've gone through this process of setting up the demo account, you'll be able to see an example of all of this Google Analytics data. So I'm just going to touch on the high-level basics of Google Analytics. In the next session, we're going to go into a lot more detail in terms of all the various reports, but I just want to give you a high-level lay of the land in the next 1 or 2 minutes. So first off, on the top left-hand side, there's the home button. So it's easy to see, easy to get back to where you are. And this is basically a nice summary of all the traffic that's happening on the website right now, okay? So a nice high-level overview, times of day, when purchases are made, what channels are in use, etc. We have what's called the real-time reports. And this is great to get an idea about who's on the website right now, where are they visiting our site from? What are the various pages that they're currently perusing, right? And I see there's a lot of activity from India on the US store site right now. And on the right-hand side, I see what's happened in the last 1 minute, as well as up above here, what's happened in the last 30 minutes on my website. So that real-time data can be valuable, especially if you're launching a campaign, either TV or digital advertising. We also have our audience reports, where we can get all sorts of information about the types of devices that are being used, as well as what types of browsers they might be using. And it's just an accordion menu on the left-hand side. I also have my acquisition reports, so I can actually see at a glance what are the various channels that are sending traffic to this website where people may be making purchases, for example. And I see organic search plays a big role. I see I have some other advertising, some display advertising, and some paid search, as well as social and referral traffic. So I can drill down into any of these to understand the lifeblood of the website, right? Where is this traffic coming from? And at the same time, what is the conversion rate for that traffic on the right-hand side? So I can understand where the most valuable traffic is coming from, okay? We also have behavior. So this will give an overview of what pages people are on, what types of interactions users are having. And then most importantly, we have our conversions. And here we have a host of e-commerce reports. So we can get the inside scoop on what particular products are users most interested in, okay? Very final thing that I want to show you is, and it looks like the Google Badge Heavyweight Pullover in black is one of the most popular items here, just over this timeline. And on the top right-hand side, this is pretty important, is the date range and the ability to compare date ranges. So if I choose March, I can also choose compare to past, and I can see the change in behavior month to month. And this is particularly important as consumer behavior has undergone some pretty radical shifts in the past few weeks, okay? And here, Google Analytics is doing all the work for me so I can see if purchases are up, and what the average price is for the purchases that are being made, et cetera. So Google is doing all the math for me, and it makes my life really easy as a marketer. Very final mention here under administration. I can see all the information here related to this Google Analytics instance. If I create this account, I can see everything, okay? And that's another tip. Create your own account so that you can see all of the features in Google Analytics. And this is where we'd find our tracking code that we'd be able to put across all of our web pages. Okay, great. And a quick recap of what we've covered off today. So it was a brief introduction to Google Analytics. We talked about really the important stuff, identifying your business goals and talking about how we manifest those goals inside of Google Analytics. We talked about how Google Analytics works, and we talked about focusing on getting the information that's going to matter most to your business. And finally, we did a little navigation of Google Analytics. There's more to come on that front. And I just wanted to pause there. We've got a few minutes left for any Q&A that anyone might have.
Yeah, thanks a ton, Scott. That was a really, really great introduction to this series. There's a ton of questions, folks. A lot of your questions will actually be answered in the subsequent training sessions that we're going to have, but I will just have a couple here that I wanted to run past you, Scott. One is a really good one. How can the quality of interactions be measured? Say we are looking for genuine connections and specific profiles. We're looking for serious users. What metrics? How do you get that data out of Google Analytics?
Sure, and you're right to think about it in terms of your business goals. The really important information is always going to ladder up to what your specific business objectives are, okay? And also comes down to what the purpose of the website is. If it's simply to provide information to customers and videos and so on, but you expect users to call your business or click on a telephone number, then those are the important things to watch. So what we usually recommend is we actually go through that formal KPI development process that we alluded to earlier. And we outlined a few steps there where you can start thinking about, well, what's really important to the business? And you want to work backwards from there into Google Analytics to find the data that's going to help you understand those parts of your business and those parts of the customer journey.
Awesome. I'm going to get one more question to you, Scott, before we kind of wrap up our series here. We had a ton of questions about cookies, which is a hot topic with all of the data privacy stuff going around. But this question, I thought we could just answer. And as I mentioned earlier in the session here, we are going to be answering all of your questions directly that we don't answer live. But here's our final question for the training. Does Google Analytics just use third-party cookies, or does it use first-party cookies as well?
Good question. Yes, and Google Analytics uses first-party cookies. That's really important because what we're seeing now is the disappearance of third-party cookies. And we had a notice from Google not too long ago saying that in 2 years, the Chrome browser would no longer support third-party cookies that were historically associated with cross-site tracking, right? So first-party cookies is what Google Analytics uses, and those are the safe cookies, the friendly cookies, and the least privacy invasive cookies that there are. But on that note, As you customize Google Analytics and send data into Google Analytics, it's very important that you don't send in any personally identifiable information about your customers. Okay, so that one gets a gold star for importance. And that's part of the service level agreement that you'll sign as you start your first Google Analytics instance. And
Awesome.
yeah.
That's all the questions we have time for. Scott, if you want to go ahead and wrap us up.
Okay, terrific. Well, again, thanks everyone for joining today. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Again, just an overview of what we're doing. This is Google Analytics 101, and Cardinal Path is bringing its training basically to the world. We focused on the fundamentals of Google Analytics today. That's part one. Part two is going to focus in on the 4 pillars of reporting. Okay, so we're actually going to drill down into some of those reports and understand how to slice and dice the information in order to get at the answers that are going to be important for your business. Part 3 of Google Analytics 101 is going to focus in on the customized reporting that you can do within Google Analytics. Okay, and so this means building custom reports, and it also means creating your own dashboard to focus in on those things that you've said are most important in your KPI development process. Okay. If you'd like to do a little bit more between now and 1 week from now, when we run part 2 of our series, there is a little bit of Google Analytics 101 homework you can undertake. Number 1, visit the Google merchandise store, look at the demo account, and install this thing called Tag Assistant by Google, so you can actually start to inspect and record all of the data that's being sent into Google Analytics, just to verify that things are being sent in a way that makes sense. And you can use that on the Google merchandise store. You can also use it on your own website if you've installed the Google Analytics tracking code there and started up a Google Analytics instance. On the right-hand side, just a reminder, we'll be sending out a KPI discovery workbook to help you structure the collection and integration of key performance indicators for your business, okay? And this is kind of step number 1. It's the most important thing, and it should drive the use of your technology in almost all cases, okay? Final reminder, just at the bottom here, have you already registered for part 2 of the GA 101 series? If you haven't yet, we'd encourage you to do so, and we'll be sending out some follow-up information, and look forward to seeing you then.